All right, let's look at the homework 1.3, problem number 6. All right, so we have two functions given. F of x is 1 over square root of x, and g of x is x plus 3. Then what we want to do is first we want to find the f of g of x. All right, so let's do that. All right, so this is part A. F of g of x. So all you have to do is kind of work from inside out. So replace g of x by its formula, which is x plus 3. All right, then using the function notation, every time you see x, you're going to put x plus 3. So it's 1 over square root of x plus 3. Right? And then if you want to find the domain of f of g, right? So we have to worry a couple of things. So first, we have to make sure that x is in the domain of the inside function g, right? So in this case, actually, there's no restriction because g of x is just a linear function, can take any real number. So x could be anywhere, so there's no restriction. I guess, so here, no restriction. All right, and number 2, and we have to make sure that the inside function, which is g of x, is in the domain of the outside function, so f, right? So you can see that here there's a square root, so x has to be non-negative. At the same time, this cannot be 0. So we know that the g of x, so this tells you that g of x has to be, so 0 is not going to be good because then denominator becomes 0. So it has to be strictly greater than 0, right? Which gives us this condition. So g of x is x plus 3. Has to be greater than 0. So if you subtract 3 from both sides, so x has to be greater than negative 3, right? So if you want to write it in interval notation, so you have left parentheses negative 3, then all the way to infinity, right? So let's type it in. So we have 1 over square root of x plus 3, right? Then its domain is going to be starting from negative 3 all the way to positive infinity, right? So we have that. All right, let's check the answer. All right, I came back and looks like we got part A correctly. All right, so let's work on part B, which is g of f, right? Just to flip the order of composition. All right, so let's look at part B. All right, so we want to look at the g of f of x, right? So this is going to be, inside function, so replace that with 1 over square root of x. And then using the function notation, so every time you see x in the formula, we're going to put the 1 over square root of x. So this is just going to be a 1 over square root of x plus 3, right? So we have that. All right, then in order to find a domain, again, we just have to do the same thing. So we have to make sure that the x is in the domain of the inside function, in this case, domain of f. All right, so which means that domain of f, x has to be, domain of f is greater than 0, right? 0 is not good, but it has to be positive, strictly positive. All right, 2. And then we have to make sure that the inside function, f of x, has to be inside the domain of g. outside function. All right, this one has no restriction, so it gives you no restriction because domain of domain of G is actually all real numbers, so no restriction. All right, so which means that if you write it in interval notation, so starting from 0 to infinity, so x is greater than 0. All right, so let's type it in. All right, so you have 1 over square root of x plus 3. Then we have to make sure that the x is positive. All right, so we have that. Let's check the answer. All right, I came back and looks like we got part B correctly. All right, so let's do part C. It's f of f. All right, so let's do that. And so part C, we want to find f of x. All right, so this is going to be equal to, all right, so f of x is 1 over square root of x. All right. Then, so using the function notation, so every time you see x in the formula, we're going to put the 1 over square root of x. So this is going to be 1 over square root of 1 over square root of x. All right, so we have that. All right, then here we can probably simplify a little bit. So you have a square root of, right? So let's do 1 over. So square root of 1 is still 1. All right, and the square root of x is going to be, if you think in terms of power, so square root is a 1/2 power. If you apply another 1/2 power, it's going to be a 1/4 power. So it's going to be a 4th root. So it's going to be a 4th root of x. And then you have a double reciprocal, so it's just going to be a 4th root of x. Right? And then we just have to look at the so two conditions. So we have to make sure that the x is in the domain of the inside function, in this case f. So which means that x has to be greater than 0. Right? We've done that before. Right? And 2. Right? So we have to make sure that the f of x, which is the inside function, has to be in the domain of the outside function, which is f again. All right, so we know that 1 over square root of x, so that has to be greater than 0. But there's, as long as x is greater than 0, the whole thing is going to be greater than 0. So there's no added condition. So we know that it's going to be, as long as it's a positive value, it will be fine. All right, so let's type it in. All right, so we have f of x is 4th root of x. Let's see, is there any, let's see, operations, function, yeah, let's use the function here. And this is going to be a 4th root of x. And then domain is all positive real numbers. All right, so we have that. All right, let's check the answer. All right, I came back and looks like we got part C correctly. All right, so let's look at part D. We're going to have to do g of x. All right, so the last one is actually quite probably simple. So you have part D. We have to do g of x. So which is equal to g of x plus 3. And then if every time you see x, you put the x plus 3, then you have a plus 3. So you have x plus 6, right? And then in order to find the domain, you have to check two things. We have to make sure that the x is in the domain of G, but there's no restriction. So no restriction. And 2, And we have to make sure that g of x, which is, so g of x has to be in the domain of g of x. Again, there's no restriction because domain of g of x is all real numbers. So which means that you can take any real number that you wish. So all real numbers. All right, so let's type it in. So we have function is x plus 6, and then domain is all real numbers. So negative infinity. Oh, infinity. I can't spell. Hold on. Infinity to positive infinity. All right. Infinity. Yep. Infinity. Yep. Oh, wait. Infinity. All right. Got that. All right. Let's check the answer. All right. It came back and looks like we got part D correctly as well. All right. That's it. I hope that this was clear.